Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about free energy motors, or people might call them over unity or magnetic motors. So pick your name, whatever you want to do. This is highly unconventional information on the conventional meter. This is pretty high up there on the unconventional meter. So I'm going to be very blunt in this video, and it's just I'm making a point, so just bear with me on that, especially if you're working on this type of technology. Please don't be offended on what I'm going to say in this video. So, first of all, the concepts that I'm going to give in this video are included in like a magnetic energy type of engine or motor, something like this one. This is like a 480 horsepower engine. So the whole point of these concepts is to give you like some ideas on what you can incorporate into a free energy motor to provide you with torque and horsepower. So this isn't some bullshit like little over unity device. This is about getting a lot of torque and a lot of horsepower out of your unit, and this is really important for a whole number of reasons. Now, first of all, I got a couple of things. All these principles, all these units incorporate the attract release principle. So we're all about utilizing the most powerful part of the magnet, attract. None of this bullshit repel motor stuff, okay? The repel is very weak compared to the attract power. A repel type of motor is complete bullshit compared to this type of a motor, which is based on attract release. So again, and now with over unity, none of these engines or these motors that I talk about are considered over unity, because this is an etheric magnetic model of the universe. So everything that flows in is exactly what flows out. So we've got etheric magnetic energy coming in, and that's the output. Now, if you were to measure the output of, like, say, this engine from the Einsteinian model, where there's no such thing as ether, there's no such thing as like magnetic energy, isn't even a thing in that model, but so this would be impossible according to the laws of physics, because in that Einsteinian model, this would be considered over unity. But we don't use those terms because we have an etheric inflow. There's a very real, measurable energy coming in and flowing out of the units, and it perfectly matches up. So there's nothing over unity about it unless you're in the Einsteinian universe. So what are some of the concepts involved in this unit, in this motor, that you should think about incorporating into your free energy motor? The first one is just magnet and coil balancing. So this is the idea, and you can look at the schematics online or whatever on the website, but it's the basic idea that when you have alternating magnets moving in front of coils or vice versa, that the size of those magnets in relationship to those coils is very critical, because as you are switching polarities, and you always want to be switching polarities in this because we are all about blending and getting neutral polarities. But as you are switching them, you want the magnet moving past the coil to already start getting the next coil into the face of the magnet. So the size and relationship of the coil to the magnet is very critical. You can't have, for example, a magnet pass over a coil and then just be sitting there in open space, okay? Because you're going to get magnetic holdback, you're going to get all these things happening, whereas you want the polarity switching to take place as the magnet hits the next coil. Then it encourages the attraction to that next coil. So think of it this way. You have north, south, north, south, north, south, and we're kind of like embedding that energy, if you want to say that. And there's even some conventional thing, and we're charging the coil with a certain polarity, but that charge then is attracted to the next magnet and is attracted to the next magnet. So it helps reduce magnetic holdback, and then it also contributes to rotation. So always alternating polarities. The next thing is there's always going to be some sort of magnetic field modification. I've talked about this in other videos. So we're either going to have some sort of containment of the magnet, some sort of wrap around the magnet, or we are going to have an influencing factor. Now in this particular unit, the influencing factor is a bar that resonates. Like it physically vibrates and resonates, and we have it positioned right on the neutral or the middle part of the magnet so that we influence the overall field dynamics of the magnet so that there is less magnetic holdback on that. So we're influencing the magnets with a magnetic energy, like embedded resonating pipe or resonating tube, if you want to say it that way, that actually physically vibrates and has a charge going through it. So we're influencing the field of the magnet. Next one is driver and generator and driver coil differentials. Now this is a very big concept in these types of units. And so what it looks like is we have coils that are for generation of power, and then we have coils that are primarily used for driving, for rotation. But we always have a difference in those coils. So like, for example, in this one, the windings are about half as much. So we have this like differential. So what we're doing is we're creating a natural feed of the magnetic energy or the charge from one coil to another in sequential use. So we want that we always want a differential of between the driver and the generator coils, and I'll get to why in a second. So the next thing is we are very big on using polarizing commutation. So what we're doing is, as the coils are channeled, as they're wired to a commutator, they're wired in sequence so they follow each other, like north-south is always chasing each other, so that we live in this world of continuous attraction. So we're using the commutator to create polarization of the coiled fields, and then we always have the lesser coil or the greater coil, however you want to say that, in terms of charge, feeding into the next one. So there's always a charge that moves. The charge naturally wants to move toward the attraction of the other coil. And that works very well in terms of polarizing the commutation so that you have continuous rotation. Now another thing would be magnetic pulse combining. So you'll see, like on a lot of the units, we have relatively small magnets that aren't even that powerful, but we have a lot of them. So there may be like 44 of them, and then 44 coils, or we might have 88 coils, or whatever it is. And so what we're doing is we're creating a lot of north-south polarities, and then we're combining them into what's going to be attracted into much larger coils. And there might only be, like in this one, it's like some people would call it an 8-pole motor. So like right up in here, in this view right here, you have alternating polarities of larger coils that are hollow core. So this is like a very Tesla type of concept. So we're creating a vortice of not only wind from rotation, but a vortice of energy in each one of those coils. And what we do is we have the commutator we have this set so that two coils always get pinged at 180 degrees apart. And so that's really important. So this is part of this, and I'll get it to the next point. But that way we have two coils at 180 degrees apart that are north-south. They're always north-south. And so the release, if you want to call it that, or the discharge on the commutator always goes to two opposing field coils at any given moment. And that allows, what comes into the next thing is paramagnetic and diamagnetic flash polarization. So what we're doing is we're taking these very charged, heavily charged coils they pack quite a punch, and we're creating, between the balancing of polarities, we create what we would call a neutral field. So you have to, and let me just be blunt about this, you have to have some sort of blending of north and south polarity, some sort of manifestation of what we call a neutral polarity or neutral polarization, in order to attract etheric energy, to get a boost of energy in the engine or in the motor. It's huge. If you don't have that, the etheric flow will always be fighting with your unit. It will always be fighting with your circuitry. It will be fighting with your coils, because it wants a neutral field to attract it. So, and you can run the test yourself. Take the neutral factor away, take the blending away, and watch the difference in the output. Watch the difference in the measurable fields around the unit and what's happening in those coils. These coils, as they get bombarded with neutral, basically blended field charging, they pulse on and off due to the way that we are having the commutator basically send them signals, and they attract in neutral etheric magnetic energy into the engine, which is measurable far above the unit and far below the unit. And it's two crazy things. Gravity's being altered inside the unit, above and below the unit, and you're getting a boost of neutral energy. Now, the other thing is that's really important is when we go to paramagnetic and diamagnetic flash polarization, the energy from those large coils hits a paramagnetic plate and it hits it in polarizing fashion. So that plate, which is near another plate, has a continuous force of attract pulling it forward. So we flash it with a polarization and then discharge, flash, discharge. And so you get where I'm going with that. You can control, because it's a paramagnetic, diamagnetic material or combination of materials, and the combination is important because a lot of times you don't want a material to be 100% paramagnetic or 100% diamagnetic, because then it's harder to break basically magnetic holdback. So there's a lot of times you'll see like what we do is we blend the elements. So we'll blend them metallurgically so that you might have like 70% paramagnetic, 30% diamagnetic. Or, you can figure out the combination that you think is best. And so, the whole point of what I'm saying here in this video is this is a scalable like a model or a design, so that you could have 5 horsepower, 10 horsepower, 20 horsepower, and then of course if you want to go full on, you can get all the way up to like the 480, 500 horsepower. So this flash polarization is key. It's huge because this is the critical point where we have paramagnetic, diamagnetic disks that are attracting and releasing to each other with tremendous force. So because they're paramagnetic, they won't hold their charge and they will readily discharge it very quickly. And then that gives us the ability to have alternating polarities that could create continuous rotation in the unit. Another critical concept is we have circuit randomization. Now, one of the easiest ways to do it, like in a unit like this, is you have your commutator has off bars. So you can randomize the off bars in the commutator. Another way to do it is to let the fields themselves choose where they're going to go with commutation. And so that sounds kind of tricky, but it has to do with like jumper wires and different things that are described in detail in this type of unit. And what it does is it allows different coils to really release their charge in a random sequence. And so why is that so important? Because if you don't do that, they won't cooperate as well, especially as soon as this unit starts pulling a draw factor, or what we would call a draw factor, but it's like pulling an additional etheric magnetic energy. That energy is coming in randomly, and so it will spike on different coils through a random process. And so what we've learned is you have to accommodate that random flow, and that's really important. Another final concept here is recycling the magnetic current. So part of this whole design is you either have to have a very good ground wire, so it would be like a coaxial cable, a copper-coated steel wire going to an actual copper ground rod in a unit, or if the unit is more mobile, like this one is designed to be, where it's actually in a vehicle, like these type of units were running in vehicles 24/7. So you cannot have a ground on that. So one of the ways to get around that, and you can't just ground to the chassis, so you've got to have something a little more sophisticated than that. So we will have the grounding or the recycling of the magnetic current is a way of like feeding the charge that builds up in the plates, feeding it back into the circuit system, feeding it up, like say for example we have like rods in there that will resonate and utilize that energy and bring it back up into the coils to recycle that energy. Now I have to touch on something that's so critical in this, and it's gap jumping. So this idea of gap jumping is anytime you are taking something that's polarized, and we would say like north south are the most common like ideas of conventional polarization, but in this model we are talking about anything that has to do with elements and elements in training, or basically becoming entrained in a magnetic field. That element creates what we would call a polarization, or some people would call it a resonance signature that is contained now in that energy field. Now that's only going to be useful for a certain amount for certain types of uses. And so in order to transform that energy into something else that we would want to use, we have to make it jump a gap. And so that's why we will have points, different points on this unit, like up in here, where we are having neutral, the blended fields, jump a gap to then turn. That allows us to then make it into a polarized energy, and then jump a gap again, and that allows us to make it back into a more neutral type of energy. So gap jumping is extremely important when you start working with this etheric magnetic energy and you are thinking about, well, God, I got all this neutral energy, but it won't do anything. That's why you have to have gap jumping, and then that allows it to take on polarizations that you can then flash charge paramagnetic and diamagnetic materials to make them incredibly attracted to each other. Attract, release, attract, release. That creates very significant torque and horsepower in your rotation. And that way you can have something that's of like great use for, there's an unlimited number of uses for that. It's transportation, generating power, whatever it is. So all these points, you got to have the gap jumping, you've got to think about being neutral, and then all those other concepts that I touched on. Incorporate those as much as you possibly can. Think about the engineering involved in that. Think about how you would make the design to accommodate those things. And luckily, we've already given really the ratios necessary for the magnets and the coils and everything that help make a design more feasible. But just in terms of thinking about that, please leave any comments or questions you have on this, because this could generate a lot of questions. But then also, if you know of other concepts that are so important that should be included in this type of free energy motor, or in terms of like neutral magnetic etheric motors. And so yeah, if you have any other concepts, please include those if you want to. And then just any comments or questions you have in general, just send them in. And I thank you for watching this, and I will see you next time.